people? Welcome to another episode of Flight Review. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. I am leaving Imagine Birch Run right now after having just seen a 12:15 showing of The Running Man. I was excited for this one, definitely intrigued. The trailer definitely had me a little bit enthused, hyped up, if you will. Wanted to see this as early as I could. Couldn't necessarily see it on a Thursday night showing, if you will, so early Friday, because I had another day off. Again, like I said, it's end of the year, so it's use it or lose it as far as vacation time and whatnot. So went ahead and did that, and I am on my way home now. Actually, I probably need to be headed to the gas station because my car is almost out of gas, but it's all good. I will make it through for this recording, I promise you that. But here, definitely got some thoughts on the latest from director Edgar Wright and company with respect to this particular film, a Stephen King adaptation, not an adaptation of the Arnold film from the 1980s of the same name, which was a loose adaptation of the original book, which I guess wasn't exactly Stephen King, or it was Stephen King, but he was writing under an assumed name. Richard Bachman, I believe, was the name that he was writing under. I actually bought the book. Bought an ebook because I wanted to read it beforehand, but I didn't. I'll explain why here shortly, after I give you the opening spiel, which of course is to remind you that for those of you who love listening to this show, and thank you to those of you who do, you can find this show and all of my other shows at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts, whatever podcatcher you use, Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Overcast, which is the one that I've used on occasion. You can find this show when I watch new movies on Fridays. Generally speaking, is when this show will pop up. We got Flight Chat over the weekends. We've got the main show on weekends, or Wednesdays, pardon me, my goodness. Learn how to speak, Ray. Wednesdays is when the main show hits. Most recently, I broke down that Forbes piece by Mark Hughes about the profitability of Superman and the direction of the DCU. All the noise and all the narratives and all the ridiculousness and all the anti-gun bullshit that you've been hearing from and seeing on social media and a bunch of different websites, places that you certainly cannot trust because they're run by nerd MAGA twits. Yeah, I break all that down, and I even add some more numbers, some more facts, some more data to Mark Hughes' argument. Even though I don't totally agree with everything that he writes and says, I had more than enough evidence to add to his argument as to why Superman is profitable and why the executives at Warner Brothers Discovery and whoever buys Warner Brothers Discovery will continue DC Studios and the DCU instead of winding the clock back 9 years to resurrect the DCEU, if you will, for any delusional hump that still wants to believe that. If you haven't listened to that breakdown, you can go ahead and find it at theflightcast.com, my regular Wednesday show, if you will. And then you can chime in on feedback and we can talk all about it this weekend on Flight Chat, which I will be doing an episode of that this weekend. I didn't do one last weekend because the Geek Ultimate Alliance stuff with the charity event, and also just didn't get a whole lot of emails. I imagine, at the very least, I'll have last week's emails, but I think I saw a couple more that filtered in for this particular week, so stay tuned for that this upcoming weekend at theflightcast.com. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank all the very loyal supporters of patreon.com/theflightcast. Thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you so much for joining and wanting to listen to my dulcet tones even further. Most recently, I did do an episode of Flight Speed where I talked about the other rumors, and I do still consider them rumors because it's been, 4 days and counting, and James Gunn, as far as I know, still hasn't said anything about V for Vendetta TV series or the Jimmy Olsen TV series. So you know what? I am treating it as hearsay, and I'll tell you exactly why if you're curious. Just said that. With respect to Monday's episode of Flight Speed that I dropped as well. I also dropped a free episode of Flight Review. Or no, not Flight Review, pardon me, Flight Alert. I dropped a free episode of Flight Alert for free members of the Patreon, because we have quite a few free members, and I think I'm going to do one thing a week for the free members. It might not always be Flight Alert, but in this case it was Flight Alert because I shared my very uncensored reactions, if you will, my joy, my enthusiasm, perhaps, maybe, about the new Super Mario Galaxy trailer that premiered just a few days ago, because I had to react to that, I had to respond to that, and I did not want to wait until a main show or feedback in order to talk about that. So yeah, look for that as part of the free tier, if you will. at patreon.com/theflightcast. All the other content you can find on any of the 3 paid tiers, if you will. The Flight Cadet tier will get you access to Flight Speed and Friday Flight, which I'll record a Friday Flight episode tonight that I will post on Patreon. Probably be more than a few things to talk about as well, including a headline that just popped up with respect to a report about a new Star Trek movie that allegedly may be happening. We'll see. We'll see how that goes, but I've got some thoughts on that I already shared a little bit on Threads, but I'll elaborate further on Flight Speed tonight for flight crew members and flight cadet members. Flight crew members will also get access to some just don't the rant show that I know a few of you have enjoyed when I pop off about something that really is irritated the hell out of me with respect to usually fandom, not necessarily franchises or studios as nearly as much, but either way, that's available for flight crew. And then flight officers, we just got a new flight officer the other day. Welcome to the club. That gets you access to everything, all of the bonus content, including bonus episodes of Flight Review and Flight Box, and also Flight Report, which that may end up ramping up a little bit shortly here, because Brent told me in our Squadcast media chat the other day that apparently, because of this Marvel DC crossover event that's happening in the comics, the subscribers of either DC Universe Infinite or Marvel Unlimited are getting free codes for 30-day free trials to the opposite source, to the opposite app. Brent, of course, is a huge Marvel fan. He is a Marvel Unlimited subscriber. He got a free code to DC Universe Unlimited and told all of us, or DC Universe Infinite, and told all of us, let us all know that apparently it was going in retro. So, of course, what did I do? Being a DC Universe Infinite subscriber, I checked my email, and sure enough, he was right. Got that code, let him know that I got it. So I got a 30-day free trial to Marvel Unlimited. And there's still a ton of shit that I need to read on DC Universe Infinite. So where am I going to go? Which one am I going to read first? Well, I need to be doing some reading soon here, so stay tuned for that. Some more episodes of Flight Report hopefully will be happening in the not-too-distant future, if you will. But all that and the other bonus content available at the Flight Officer tier. Thank you so much for those of you who have joined in. Hope you're enjoying the bonus content. Cannot thank you enough for your support to patreon.com/theflightcast. All right, let's talk about The Running Man. So I mentioned before that I bought the book because I had this idea the other day that I was going to read the book, right? Because here's the thing. I've known from the beginning here that this version of The Running Man, Edgar Wright's version, was going to be more accurate to Stephen King's original novel, which again, of course, he wrote under the Richard Bachman pen name. You can find it under Stephen King now. And they got a rebranded version of it that has Glenn Powell's face right on the cover because, of course, what does it say on the cover? Now a major motion picture, which it now is. Yes, indeed. So yeah, I was going to read it. And then I got home and got really tired and crashed early from work. I was like, okay, I don't really have the energy to read this. But on top of that, I also forgot my earlier rule that I have about reading books before seeing a movie adaptation. It's the Harry Potter rule. I brought this up before, because back when the Harry Potter movies, were hot and heavy before all the horrible shit with J.K. Rowling came out, and Harry Potter was the talk of the town for everyone. My friends that read the books and still watched the movies, even though they enjoyed the movies, had a laundry list of complaints about, well, they cut this out of the book, they cut that out of the book, they didn't go here, they didn't go there, and that bugged me. I don't necessarily care for that perspective because I think that even though these movies are adapted works, and even though there is something to be said for remaining as true to the source material as you can for a genuine experience at the theater, it's still a theatrical experience. It's still a movie. It's still not the book, right? It's still not the source material for the comic or the book or the novel or the short story or whatever it is, right? So what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to be one of those people, and I still don't want to be one of those people that reads the book and then complains or has all these, this dissension in my head, if you will, like, well, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, I wish they would have done this, I wish they would have done that. I think Watchmen is the only book I've read before seeing the movie, and that was a case where I wasn't certain. I didn't believe the movie was ever going to be done. So when the movie actually happened and Zack Snyder made it, that turned into a celebration. It was like, wow, he kept so much more in the book than I thought he was going to. That's great. That's awesome. I'm glad he fought for that. Right? It's still one of his seminal masterpieces. I won't argue with anybody if they still think that Watchmen is Zack Snyder's best film. I won't argue with that at all. Don't necessarily agree, but at any rate, I digress. So even though I have the ebook and I do want to read The Running Man at some point, because I am curious about that original King novel in terms of when it was written and the imagery involved in it. I didn't read it for this purpose. I didn't read it for the purposes of watching this film. And I can already know, like I already know that going into this film was going to be a very different experience, right? This isn't going to be another Total Recall. And that was a case where the reason I read We Can Remember It For You wholesale is because I wanted to settle the arguments that my buddies were already having before even seeing the movie about how the new version with Colin Farrell and Kate Beckinsale and Jessica Biel and Bryan Cranston didn't, it already looked like they destroyed the original film, and it's not this and it's not that. So I go to the original short story in order to find out what the basis for that is. And that's a case where, because I love the original Total Recall, and I do enjoy the Colin Farrell film as well, I can tout We Can Remember It For You wholesale, written by Philip K. Dick, and remind everybody that, hey, if you're angry about source material changes, well, Total Recall, the Arnold version, fudged a lot of shit too. Like, there's a whole lot that's in that movie that was nowhere near that. That short story is about recall. That short story isn't even told from Quaid's perspective, and it's not even Quaid. His name is Quail, and he comes into recall to get a memory implant procedure and starts spouting off spy shit and freaks out the owner of Recall and everybody else on staff. That's what the actual short story We Can Remember It For You wholesale is about. No three-breasted women, no Mars, no mutants, none of that shit, right? I don't even think Cohagen is mentioned. All that was made for the movie, which I don't have an issue with. I don't have an issue with that. For me, with movies, I am okay. I have no issues if you loosely adapt a project, if you loosely adapt something and make your own story out of it for the time, or if you go more accurate. So this was never going to be a case where I was going to look at this Edgar Wright version of Running Man and compare it harshly or fondly to the Arnold Schwarzenegger version, right? I'm treating them as two separate entities. I really am. And that's really how they should be taken, especially, in my opinion, certainly now feeling that way after having watched the film, is I really don't think there should be any really direct complaints or direct comparisons made. They're two very, very different films. I mean, there's similarities, most certainly. There's definitely things that they take from the original story that they do incorporate into here, but they're very different. They're very different stories. And if this one is more accurate to the short story, or the novel rather, then that just gives me, even more energy, if you will, more impetus, more interest to read King's original novel and see exactly where the differences and whatnot lie, especially with respect to a big part of this movie that I think is really intriguing as far as making this movie right now and releasing it in November of 2025. And that feels like a perfect segue into my high-level thoughts for this version of The Running Man. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Of course I enjoyed it. I'm rarely going to get on this show and tell you I didn't enjoy it. It's happened here and there. But even in the case of Thor: Love and Thunder, I still enjoyed the last third of that film. I enjoyed the third act of that movie. The rest of it, didn't really care for. But very rarely am I going to get on here and talk to you about a movie, especially for, half hour, an hour, however long these episodes are. Very rarely am I going to waste time talking to you about a movie that I didn't care for, to be honest with you, right? And generally speaking, if I go see it, then I have some interest in it, and I'm going to enjoy it on some level, so I won't mind discussing it, right? Because I take accountability for my feelings. I take accountability for my emotions when it comes to movies and television in that regard, right? And this version of The Running Man, I did enjoy. There were a number of things about this movie that I really did enjoy. And again, this is a very different take than the Arnold movie. So if you're going into this, anybody going into this expecting anything close to the Arnold movie, no. I mean, you can tell from the trailer. The trailer does not lie. The trailer does not lie to you. The trailer does not give you anything. I mean, even in terms of how the characters are situated, right? Like, you look back at the original, or the older film, rather, in the 80s, you had Richard Dawson playing Killian then, and he was the host of the show in addition to being the boss. Well, that's what they did in the 80s. That was just the thing. That was like the 80s thing to do. This time, they've completely separated the two characters. Killian is completely separated from Bobby T, who actually hosts the show, and they've got two different actors to do it, and there's a reason, a really good reason, in my opinion, in terms of how the movie is structured, that they do it this way. Like, this one just cuts much closer to home. It does. It really does, and I really do want to talk about that when I get to the story. But yeah, it's this movie in many ways can probably feel heavy-handed to a decent amount of people. I can imagine Stu and maybe a couple of others, some of you watch this movie and you go, well, okay, this was a little on the nose. You might get maybe a Supergirl feel when you watch this film. I don't personally. I feel like it's more Black Lightning. And for people who listen to me talk about the DCCW/Arrowverse shows on DC TV, Squadcast, Arrowverse, Squadcast Media, you know what I'm talking about. For those who haven't heard my stuff from before then, this is what I'll tell you. The allegory that I made was when it comes to moral messages, when it comes to extra depth and real-world parallels, the CW did it two different ways, and those two shows are like the extremes, if you will. Not the extremes necessarily, but the two different ways that you can do it. In Supergirl, whenever a moral message would come up on the CW, they would always reference a real-life event. Like, I remember the one that I will never forget. There was an episode where it dealt with children being poisoned by Morgan Edge, and through the water. And I remember it was the Lena Luthor's character. She, after recovering from a poisoning or whatnot, she wakes up and she's talking to Kara and and Alex, I think, and she literally says out loud, "This can't be another Flint, Michigan." Like, she referenced the Flint water crisis in a fictionalized DC universe. It's like, okay, that's on the nose, that's obvious, but that's how that show did it. That's how the show did their moral messages. Conversely, Black Lightning, they would take something that happened in real life and they would apply it to Freeland where they lived. I remember there was an episode where there were Confederate monuments that weren't in Charlottesville. They didn't mention Charlottesville at all, but they mentioned that there were Confederate monuments in Freeland that had been torn down, crumbled, I think, by Anissa's character, Thunder, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've watched that show. But my point is that they took that, and then also the Tuskegee experiment, right? They took the Tuskegee experiment and they made a DC Comics Freeland version of it for their allegory. So they built it into their story, they built it into their world. And that was how they got their moral message out. And I think the Running Man, to bring this back home, to land this plane, the Running Man is closer to Black Lightning, in my opinion, as far as that goes. But the reason people might feel like it's heavy-handed is because it's our world. It's our reality. And making a movie like this now and releasing a movie like this right now, boy, depending on how you process these messages, it can be a little sobering. Because some of what happens in this movie is like, that's real close. That's real close to how shit actually happens now. How the world we live in actually behaves now, right? So it's it's a little scary. That's the scariest part of the film. It is. By far the scariest part of the film is how real some of the shit actually could be, right? Like, you're just watching and you're just paying attention to Wright's style in terms of how he puts things together and brings together the story on the screen, and what you're hearing and what characters are saying and how they're behaving, and it's like, damn, all right. Yeah, this is a message that is going to fall on a lot of deaf ears, because you just don't have a whole lot of faith that the larger society, American society, is going to watch this movie and get the picture. But yeah, it's kind of sobering. It's kind of sobering indeed, for sure. So in talking about the cast of this film, I mean, all manner of props in respect to Glenn Powell. Here's the thing about Glenn Powell. First of all, that dude is everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, you see him in Top Gun Maverick, and he's popping up in just every damn thing since then. And I will give him credit. You know what he perfected in this movie that I think he's really got down pat? Pay attention. Those of you that have watched this movie, like, go back and think about this, or if you haven't seen it yet, and mind you, this is a spoiler review. I mean, I'm not necessarily going to go in depth in terms of spoilers, because I don't feel like I have to do that with respect to this particular film. I feel like I can talk spoiler-free about this one and still get my point across with it. But Glenn Powell has perfected the Tom Cruise run. I'm sorry, every time the dude ran on screen, he looked like Tom Cruise running. Like Tom Cruise running, especially from the Mission Impossible movies, Glenn Powell has that style. And I'm not against it. I don't think it's a bad way to run, especially in a movie like this. It works out great, but he's got to do more than run. He's really got to portray the anger, and he's got to portray the visceral emotions of Ben Richards, who's going through this in order to save his family, but really his daughter, who's sick, right? And that's what this is all about, like earning enough money to save the life of his daughter who is dying of complications because they can't afford the treatment, they can't afford the medication to be able to get her better in that regard. And so Glenn Powell as Ben Richards, I mean, it is a very different portrayal, than we've seen before, and there's a lot more depth. Powell has to do a lot more. Powell has to do a whole lot more, and he's got to sell you that he is this family man that will literally kill a brick for his child, right? That's a phrase that my uncle uses. My Uncle Dave, he says, I would kill a brick for, my sisters or for me or anybody else, right, in the family. And Powell has to make you believe that he would do that. And in my opinion, pound for pound, he did. I don't have any complaints whatsoever with Glenn Powell's acting. And his ability to be a leading man in a film like this, not that I necessarily questioned it, but this is the first time I've seen it, because I haven't, jumped on the Glenn Powell train and like just all of a sudden consumed so many of his movies since Top Gun Maverick. This, I think, is the next one, the latest one since Top Gun Maverick that I have actually watched. And you know what? Pound for pound, great performance. Fantastic. Very physical, very visceral. Plenty of eye candy for the ladies or the men, if they are attracted to Glenn Powell. For anyone attracted to an attractive man like Glenn Powell, yes, there's a lot there. There's a hell of a lot there for you to enjoy. And, you can call it gratuitous. I mean, sure, maybe there are some gratuitous male gaze shots in this film. Perhaps there are, yeah. But I don't think that they're necessarily, maybe the towel thing, because there is a point, without getting deep into why this happens, there is a point in the movie where he's on a ledge after he just got out of the shower wearing a towel, wearing nothing but a towel. And so, yeah, maybe that was a little over the top. I don't know that you're doing that with a woman these days and getting away with it on camera, but it is what it is. It's there for you if you wish to enjoy it, no doubt about that. But Glenn Powell, phenomenal. I really had no complaints whatsoever. And I don't have really any complaints about the cast itself. And there's a lot of players, there's a lot of one-hit players here who have some sequences here, like William H. Macy, his character Molly. He's really just kind of the underground connection that helps Ben get started, at the beginning, and that's, he's there for a little bit and, does his time or does his part and, rides off into the sunset, if you will. Michael Cera was funny, but here's the thing. Michael Cera, you could probably relate his humor in this to like Arrested Development or any of his other roles and whatnot and make the connection and say, yeah, it's the same type of humor, but it was different here. It was like darkly comedic. It was very darkly comedic here. And I'm not saying he hasn't done darkly comedic stuff before, but he was just a lunatic. He was an absolute lunatic. His part of the movie, I actually quite enjoyed. I got a kick out of it, to be honest with you. I really did like that. As far as the other big players throughout this film, I mean, Josh Brolin, look, we already know Josh Brolin can play an asshole. The question is, can he play a corporate asshole? Yeah, of course he can play a corporate asshole. And most certainly, he plays the role of Killian corporate asshole extremely well. No complaints with respect to that. But this is Thanos we're talking about here, okay? Like, Josh Brolin has played these characters before, and it's not that he can't play good characters, because he's played protagonists before as well. But yeah, he absolutely does the job, does the trick here, expertly so, and is just a very, corporately conniving, twisted, yeah, you can't trust a damn thing this dude is telling you throughout the entire movie whatsoever, right? He plays that extremely well, as Josh Brolin would be expected to play it. I mentioned that they separated Killian's character from the host of the actual Running Man show, Bobby T, played by Coleman Domingo. Now, I don't have a whole lot of experience with Coleman Domingo as an actor. I don't. I will admit that there's a bunch of his stuff I don't think I've seen. But for what he's playing in this role, it works. It almost reminds me, it's kind of a reverse, going back again to the Arnold connection, if you will. The Total Recall reboot, I remember what they did was, instead of having Laurie and Richter, Sharon Stone and Michael Ironside's character, they just fused the two characters into one character and made it Kate Beckinsale. She was essentially Laurie and Richter at the same time, which was awesome because there was this, I don't know what they couldn't have Sharon Stone, or I guess the compunction in the 90s was, you can't have a woman chasing after Quaid the whole way. Okay, whatever. Well, you certainly could. You can now in the 2000s. And Kate Beckinsale absolutely had the ability to be this imposing force while also being incredibly hot at the same time, right? So they did the reverse of that here, where instead of having Killian be one, they separated the two and made the host, you know, of the Running Man a separate entity, so they could go with the whole, you know, the presentation and the buffoonery. And let's be clear, I mean, Dawson, obviously in the old film, he was just going to be himself, right? He's just playing him, essentially, in, you know, hyper stylized, you know, narcissistic fashion in the 80s film, right? Here, Domingo is just ratcheting that up to 20 as far as how Bobby T plays this. He is the minstrel. He is the tap dancer. He is the, you know, the peddler, if you will. He knows his role and, you know, leans into it, like with respect to what he does hosting the Running Man show and being the front man for it, you know, and understands this contract and the show business and all that nonsense and whatnot. And he plays it well. I mean, there is a great deal of that. I mean, it's dripping with just over-stylized hamming it up, you know, as these presenters do, as these flim-flam men, these snake oil salesmen do in that regard. So he plays his role well. Roland, of course, plays his role well. The times that we certainly see Jamie Lawson as Ben's wife, you know, Jamie Lawson is Jamie Lawson. She's another one that's starting to pop up in a lot of things, right? You know, Bella Real, obviously, in the Batman, the Mayor of Gotham, Perline in Sinners, which, you know, might be my favorite of her roles at this point, but that Sinners is the movie of the year. Sinners is still the movie of the year as far as 2025 is concerned, subjectively speaking, in my humble opinion. But, you know, she's got to play the wife, and she's got to be the recurring. There was almost like now that I think about it, it's almost like a Gladiator quality here, where Maximus kept having flashbacks of his wife and child, right? It's a similar scenario here, but, you know, he's doing it for them, you know, because they're in protection elsewhere, and he's earning money for them. That's what Richards is doing. He's earning money for them, and you know, trying to survive the 30 days for them, to get them out of the slums and to give them a better life and whatnot. And so, you know, Jamie Lawson is Jamie Lawson. I have no complaints about her. I did not expect Katie O'Brien to be in this movie. Katie O'Brien is one of the other runners, and that's also a very different dynamic. And again, I can't stress enough how different this movie is from the Arnold film, so really do not go into it with any expectations like that film, because the other runners here, it's a very different dynamic. That's all I'll say with respect to it. It's a really, really different dynamic as far as the runners, and Katie O'Brien is one of them. And when you get into the nitty-gritty of the rules and the structure of the game, you totally understand what her character is and why she plays that character, because she's another one that just randomly pops up in shit, randomly pops up in a Marvel movie, randomly popops up in Black Lightning, randomly pops up in flipping Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Did I say Marvel movie? What's another thing? Oh, The Mandalorian. Was it The Mandalorian? Yes. The Mandalorian, I believe, is what she's in. Sometimes I get my Empire people crossed between Mandalorian and Andor, which is two different eras, right? Because one is before the Battle of Yavin, one's after, right? But yeah, she's in The Mandalorian. She's one of or either The Mandalorian or Ahsoka. Damn it, I can't remember. One of the two. But either way, she's been popping up on a lot of stuff. And understandably, I don't have any issues with it. I know people that want her to be Wonder Woman. And I will tell you, from a size perspective, that would be an interesting challenge. But from a physicality and an acting perspective, sure. Yes. Certainly she could play that. I'm not worried about her being able to perform the role whatsoever. Yes, absolutely. But it was cool to see her in this movie. You know, and I'm in the car, so I forgive me, I do not have the name of the actress who plays the girl in the car towards the end of the film. I want to shout out to her, because clearly she is someone, the character that she's playing in this film, I don't want to grab my phone, so we'll talk about this later, I'm sure. But the character that she plays in the movie is arguably one of the characters that people might think is the most heavy-handed. And again, I really think you have to be like incredibly cynical to go into this movie and to watch this movie and think that it's that heavy-handed in terms of its imagery and its messaging, just because a lot of it is real. A lot of it is stuff that you like feel in reality, if you will. But her character, you know, there were a couple of characters in here. There was the dude, there was the one black dude, and again, I'm in the car, so I can't like, I haven't stopped the car. Like when I'm at a stop, I could probably pull this up and get a name for these names for these particular actors. I know this dude before. I know this brother before. But one of the brothers that was helping Ben Richards and the thing that he does in the film, right? Like he presents a very specific character archetype for this story, and so does The Girl in the Car. And they're both real-world allegories in terms of a perspective that real-world people would have in a situation like this. And I think that the both of them do their jobs very well, right? And again, if you're really cynical, you might think of it as after-school special heavy-handed. I do not. I think that they were orchestrated, quite deftly for the tone and tenor of this film, which is definitely something I'm going to talk about here in a little bit with respect to story and visuals, because there's definitely something that I detected with my feelings in watching this film, through my enjoyment of it, that I definitely want to bring up. Lee Pace as the lead hunter, if you will. I mean, it's Lee Pace, right? Do I think he's a better villain in this than he was as Ronin in Guardians? Actually, yes. Truthfully, and you see less of his face. But they give him a little bit more meat, not a ton. He's still, largely one note. They give him a little bit more meat on the bone of his role in this villainous character than they did in Guardians of the Galaxy. So I will say that, yes, I do think this is a better villainous portrayal than Ronin, although he's still a lead henchman. He's not really the main villain. He's not the primary villain. The primary villain is absolutely Killian. The primary villain is the network in that regard with respect to this. So, but I didn't have any complaints with how it's Lee Pace. Come on, Lee Pace is awesome. Seriously. Going all the way back to the Hobbit films, going to, Halt and Catch Fire, which I still haven't seen, but I've heard he's really good in it. He's in Foundation. I haven't seen that. I need to see that. There's a lot of Lee Pace stuff that I need to watch. But I have no complaints about him. I don't have any complaints about this cast. I think everybody played their roles extremely well and fit into the story as it was being presented and told here on screen. And to that end, this is one of the things that really clicked into my brain, especially talking about the story of this film. The story of this film, now, again, I'm very curious to know, at some point in the not-too-distant future, I do want to read the original King novel, The Running Man, because he wrote that book many years ago, right? And the future that he envisioned, right, it's sobering. It really is. Because when you look at this movie today, and you look at the imagery, you look at the way the story is constructed, the way that this world works in this movie, it's the scariest part of the film by far. Because this is a movie that it should feel like crazy, dystopian, off-the-wall future. This movie should be presenting us a future that seems like the worst-case scenario. Wow, if we let things get this bad, then my goodness, right? It shouldn't be a movie that I go watch and go, well, we're not that far from this now, but that's where I'm at. That's where we're at. That's where I'm at perspective-wise. And maybe those of you who have seen it, you disagree, but come on. There are certain things, imagery, they took some real-world stuff. They took plenty of real-world stuff, right? Look at the logo of the network. If you are this is all I'll say, because I am going to try and keep this a bit more spoiler-free. If you look at the logo of the network, if you look at the logo that the network uses, and if you know anything about gun manufacturers, then you know what logo they're spoofing. You know good and damn well what logo they're spoofing. And I know because my dad has one. He had one when he worked on the force. I know exactly what that logo looks like. And don't tell me that wasn't on purpose. Absolutely it was. There are acronyms from the real world that are used with respect to the world. And listen, none of this is gratuitous. None of this is force-fed. All of this fits the story. All of this fits the world that Edgar Wright and company deftly built in this film. It's just scary because it's too close to real. It's too close to reality. In my opinion, it's too close to reality. And I don't say that as a bad thing. It's just the whole time I'm watching this movie, damn, damn, and just, well, damn. Really? Really? We're talking about this, we're talking about that, we're talking about Medicaid, we're talking about hunger, we're talking about class warfare, we're talking about layoffs, we're talking about public safety, regulations, deregulation, monopolies, network, media manipulation, all of this shit. Listen, I'm going to say this, and you know what? Maybe we'll get a chance to talk with some others about it. But all right, anybody out there, we've talked about, because this is a Paramount movie. This is a great time to bring this up. This is a Paramount movie. Running Man is a Paramount film. All of you that are worried sick that if Paramount buys Warner Brothers Discovery, that they're going to immediately jettison James Gunn and Peter Safran because their agenda for the DCU will be too woke. This movie proves wrong. You are wrong. This movie is one of the most woke movies Paramount could possibly make. There is nothing in the DCU that James Gunn and Peter Safran could think of over the next 10 years that will be nearly as overtly woke as this film. This film is, without using it in a derogatory way, I'm reclaiming the term from Fox News. This is a super woke film. The Running Man is a super woke film. Oh my God. There is so much in here. So this just proves my point that these executives, these one percenters, these people that clearly voted for the regime in charge in the United States do not give a shit about the moral messages in these movies. They only care about how much money these movies are making. And I don't think The Running Man is going to make a ton of money. I really don't. Because I don't think it's that type of a film that's just going to engender that much of the general audience like that, truthfully. We'll see. I would love to be surprised, but I feel like in the climate that we're in today, I don't know that a ton of people are going to race out to see this movie. I saw this movie at 12:15 on a Friday, in November, and there were 5 other people in the theater. Whatever, it is what it is. But my point is, this movie got greenlit. Don't tell me the Ellisons didn't know what was in this movie. Don't tell me that the executives and the people in charge didn't know what was in this movie. They all knew what was in this movie, and they let it go. They let it go because it's a money-making opportunity. They don't give a shit how woke the message is. They don't care about all the layers and the subtext. And there's layers and subtext, some obvious, some subtle, right? And we're talking even in the visual language of this film, right? Like this story is far more woke than the Arnold movie. And this goes back to the original novel. The idea is that Richards has got a sick kid. He's got a wife and a sick kid, and he's doing his damnedest because he keeps getting fired for doing the right thing, for making the right OSHA reports, if you will, for talking, defending his coworkers, saving them, reporting violations, right? He keeps putting himself and his career on the line for other people, and he keeps getting bitten in the ass for it by these corporations. And he's at a point now where his child is sick. His child is effectively dying, and he and his wife cannot afford to get the daughter the right treatment. And so rather than put the wife at risk doing what she does, being, womanized and likely assaulted by men with her job being a waitress, he decides to go and audition to be on one of the network game shows because that's the easiest way for the working class poors, if you will, to make money in this world. And based on your tryouts, you get slotted into a game. And the one he doesn't want to go to, obviously, is The Running Man. So, of course, that's the one he's going to go because it's the most lethal of them. It's not the only lethal one, but it's the most lethal one. And they do show us at least one other game show that you just watch and go, that's messed up. That's really messed up and gratuitous and just wow. But we actually have had reality shows like the one in the movie. Right? Maybe it's not as as embarrassing as directly embarrassing, but certainly there have been stories about certain shows that we've actually watched in real life. Shows like The Biggest Loser, or Extreme Makeover, stuff like that. Right? Just saying, those types of shows really exist, and that's where this stuff. I mean, so much of this story. I really want to see how much of it was pulled from King's original novel, because if he predicted this shit back then wow, it's a Simpsons job. It's The Simpsons, basically. Was he a writer for The Simpsons? Because, man, did he predict a lot of shit. Because, holy shit, this movie. There's just so much in it that's just that's too close to real. That's too close to real. That's actually happening now, right? There's shit in this movie that is actually happening now, right? And I love it. I do love it. That part of the story I really appreciate because, when you don't pull punches and when you actually do put this into your story, when you actually do put these elements into your story, when you talk about real world situations and sacrifices and whatnot that people make, when you talk about the actual what the working class goes through in a movie like this, yeah, it's important. It's a big, important message to get through, and I applaud Edgar Wright, and I applaud the writers for incorporating this message and not pulling any punches with it. I do applaud them for that. I do appreciate when cinema does that. But man, was it sobering. Man, was it one of those things where you just sit there and all you can do is laugh like, this is real. This is like, ILM and visual effects and whatnot, but this shit happens in real life. Yeah. The line, there's a point here, how about this? I can segue this into the visuals because I love the visual look of this film, and this also allows me to talk about the style of Edgar Wright's filmmaking, because this is an Edgar Wright film through and through in terms of how it's shot, in terms of how it's composed, in terms of the tone. And that was one thing that was messing with me initially at the beginning of the movie, is because there were certain times where I felt like some of the more emotional moments were missing something. But you know what? It's not that they were missing something. I mean, maybe subjectively speaking for me they were, but that's Edgar Wright's style. And not that Edgar Wright misses emotional tone, he just has a very distinct way that he conveys emotional tone. And I have not seen all of his movies, but I've seen enough of them, I think, to get an idea of how he like composes things. I've seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I've seen Hot Fuzz. I've seen Shaun of the Dead. I've seen Baby Driver. And so I just get an idea of his tone and his style, and visually speaking and emotionally speaking, and this is just how he composes things. He has this way of still not pulling his punches, still landing the blows as hard as he can, but doing it in this weird, like, more commercialized sense. It's crazy. I almost feel like he's one of those filmmakers that he can get away with being, with heavy-handed messaging, because the producers and the studios are none the wiser, because his movie looks like a standard, over-stylized Hollywood blockbuster schlock, if you will, like Michael Bay, basically. Edgar Wright, I think, fools studios into thinking he's more like Michael Bay than he is like Christopher Nolan, but he's really in between. He's like half Nolan, half Bay. Edgar Wright, seriously, is half Christopher Nolan, half Michael Bay. And that is praise coming from me, because I enjoy both filmmakers, right? I'm not a Michael Bay hater. I'm not. Never have been, never will be, unless the person turns out to be someone horrible, which I've heard he's not that great of a person in real life. But I'm talking about directing style. I love Nolan's directing style. I love Michael Bay's directing style for very different reasons, but Edgar Wright is like the in-between. And so that, to me, when it clicked with me halfway through. I'm like, okay, I know why this feels this way. This feels this way because this is his style. This is what he does. This is how he tells his story. And I respect that. I do. Because it makes his movies distinctive, and it really does push him into the auteur category, which I think he is, truthfully. So, yeah. All manner of applause and kudos to Edgar Wright. Because, again, the visual language of this film, and this is what I really want to talk about. This is the thing I wanted to bring up. There's a point in the movie where Ben Richards is walking through where he lives. Right? Like, he goes out and he's walking through the slums, and he's walking through all the working class, all of the people waiting in line for handouts and foods and whatnot, all the people struggling, right? He walks through and he goes up to the front gate to be let in to go talk to the network offices, and he's told on a totalitarian loudspeaker, no loitering, go straight to the office, right? Well, when he gets through the gates, you realize, oh, he just was allowed into the rich side of town, because now he's walking through Manhattan. Basically, all the rich, or Michigan Avenue in Chicago, or the rich people, like all the people that are well off, the families that are well off. He's walking through that to get to the line of poorers that are waiting to audition for the games, right? And being guarded by jackbooted thugs straight out of Masters of the Universe with the black leather and the helmets and all that shit, and the stun batons from flippin' Demolition Man, only way more aggressive, right? They look like freaking PR-24s that the cops actually carry and whatnot, right? But the way that Wright handles it visually, where he walks out of the poor world into the rich world, and it's like, oh my God. the juxtaposition couldn't be any clearer. Like, and he does it visually. There's no dialogue. There's no, like, exposition. It's just from one extreme to the other, visually speaking. And it's really well done. I do enjoy Edgar Wright's visual style, because he has this way of being subtle and also overt at the same time. And I really dig it. I really dig Wright's visual style for this film. And of course, ILM, I mean, come on, impeccable visual effects. If there's any CGI in this film, and I imagine there's some, but there's probably a lot of practical in this film as well. Not noticeable. Seriously, not noticeable. I feel like this is a really well composed film from a visual standpoint in that regard. So I have no complaints with respect to the visual language of this film. And also the storytelling devices that he uses, where we peer into Ben's dreams here and there, and we're seeing sequences that, sometimes we go into his mind and we see something that didn't actually happen, or something that he dreamed was happening, or something that he envisions in his mind, because we're really being placed into the mind of Richards in terms of his rage and his anger and his frustration with the world that he lives in and what he's just trying to do for his wife and child. And I think it's handled very well. And again, just lines right up into Edgar Wright's visual style throughout all of his films. This is a Stephen Price score with a couple of needle drops, and it's nothing that is like, blatantly obvious or anything that like, oh wow, okay, I'm really digging this. It's not a score that necessarily stands out and separates itself from the pack, but it is one that does support the film, right? At the very least, a musical score, along with needle drops, and there are a couple here and there, are set to support the film. And I mean, there's a lot of like dystopian RoboCop stuff in here. And when I say RoboCop, because we do see commercials and we do see a lot of television presentation, right? And I'm sure there's music and there's other audio cues for that, which also do kind of take you a little bit out of it. But even with RoboCop, Basil Polaris' score for that is a barn burner, if you will, right? I would not say that about Price's score for this particular film, but it's not a bad score. It isn't. It's just a score that supports. It's not, I wouldn't call it the weakest link, because it does its job. And if you do your job, then I don't consider you the weakest link. It's just not one that like jumps out at me. It's not where it's like, oh, let me go listen to that score on the way home. No, I wasn't feeling that. I'm not feeling that now. I didn't immediately go to Apple Music before I started this recording to go look for it. It's just good in support, I think, truthfully. And I will give it that. It's one of those types of scores in that regard, but not one that just necessarily jumps out at me as like, oh wow, this is such an iconic piece of music. Here and there, maybe I'll feel differently about it on a second watch, but we'll see. And right there, just saying, maybe I'm talking about a second watch in that regard, that just gives you a good indicator that yes, I did enjoy this film. The subtext, whether it was obvious or whether it was like subtle in terms of the imagery and the story, I really enjoyed. The way that they compose the story, the acting, all the elements of this. I think this is a really solid film. I don't think it's a film that is going to make Paramount a ton of money. It would not surprise me if it doesn't beat out Predator: Badlands in the second weekend. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. It's rated R. Like, this one's rated R, so that already cuts off your audience. This is a heavier film in terms of the subject matter. It is really close to home. It does. It has a lot of stuff in it that does hit close to home. And if you don't consider it, heavy-handed after-school special, then you still might consider it, like not enough of a suspension of disbelief to disconnect you from the real world. And you don't necessarily, you hear the people talk all the time, well, I don't go to movies to watch, actual things about what's happening in real life. Yeah, I'm sure you don't, but that doesn't make them any less poignant with respect to, what you're seeing. And I do enjoy stories like that. A number of you, I think, do as well, right? And, again, if I were to talk about, how this movie handles those types of messages, I would compare it way more to Black Lightning than I would to Supergirl. We don't hear, I mean, there's a couple of things here and there that, may point to the world that we live in, but, no one's named, right? They're not pointing to anyone in the current regime or any of the current networks or anything like that. It's all within the specter of their world, but the messages are there. The messages are absolutely there. And, I appreciate what they do with it. I appreciate the storytelling devices that they employ. I do like Edgar Wright's style. I am a fan of his. He's not necessarily a box office darling, right? I don't think all of his movies have made all the money in the world, but he is a filmmaker that can be successful, and that certainly can be critically acclaimed. It has been critically acclaimed a number of times in that regard. But this, to me, is certainly one of his stronger films. Is it one of my more favorite of his films? I'd have to watch it again, to really rank it. And I haven't seen all of his movies, right? I haven't seen, The World's End, and there's a lot of storytelling devices. It's similar to what he did in Scott Pilgrim, similar to what he did in Baby Driver. Or I'd have to rewatch those. I'm due for an Edgar Wright rewatch at some point, in the midst of also trying to watch other new stuff. How do I rank Edgar Wright's films? How do I rank this as another Edgar Wright film? I think as far as adaptation, it's very sound, very solid. And again, this does lead me to be a bit more intrigued to read the Stephen King novel and find out just exactly how much of that did he take for this film, as opposed to the stuff that he drew on in real life parallels, right? And did King predict that much of the world that we actually live in that can connect to this film's style and story, if you will. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I really liked it. I thought it was good. Definitely one, not necessarily a repeat viewing in the theater, but certainly one where, the Steelbook is already up for pre-order on Amazon. And yeah, this is one to get. This is one to get. Put it right next to the Arnold one. And I cannot stress this enough one more time. Anybody that has not seen this film, do not go into this film thinking Arnold movie. No, absolutely not. If you've seen the trailer, you know it's different enough. But yeah, this is closer to the King novel. And the Arnold movie was not that close to the King novel. From what I know of the King novel, right, from the synopsis that I've read of it, this is much closer to that King novel than the Arnold film is. So treat them as separate entities. Treat them as separate adaptations made in separate time periods for separate types of audiences in that regard. And you will be just fine, hopefully, in that regard. Again, if you don't feel like some of the stuff in this film was so heavy-handed, which again, I don't. Think Black Lightning, more Black Lightning, less Supergirl, in my opinion. That's the best allegory, the best way that I can describe it for you. But I liked it. I really did enjoy it. It was a good watch. And so that'll do it for this particular episode of Flight Review, which really turned out to be a more spoiler-free review of The Running Man. I could definitely have some spoiler conversations with respect to any of you. If you have any spoiler thoughts, if you've seen this movie, you want to talk about some stuff that you saw, some scenes, some characters, some things that you liked, some things that you didn't like, you want to get spoiler heavy into it, we can absolutely have that discussion. You can send in your feedback. You know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the FLITEcast, on BLUESKY at FLITEcast. You can comment on the posting for this particular episode of Flight Review on the FLITEcast YouTube channel, right? youtube.com/the FLITEcast. There's also the FLITEcast Facebook page, and of course it can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. Yeah, I would love to talk about this film. Would love to have some discussions with respect to what you guys thought about this movie, and of course anything else with respect to movies, TV, and other assorted media. I am parked and back in the area close to home, so I will say take care, stay safe out there, have a great weekend, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.